This team pilots, especially when we jump over to Marco's side of the field. You know, Marco's running the same 6 Pokemon we just saw in the last round, and you have to assume that, you know, maybe this is also a more offensive Dragapult. Maybe this is also going to be one of those critical hit Togekiss that did so well previously. So even though Marco, you know, is an up-and-coming trainer, I think this team is definitely one you have to be afraid of, and I cannot wait to see how these two are going to match up.
Absolutely. So I do wonder, Togekiss, how it can work in this matchup here, as there is the Celesteela on the other side, as well as Landorus. Landorus is a Pokemon we have seen. It's not back to its heyday of every team running the Landorus that, you know, we enjoyed back in the day using Gabby. But right now, Landorus Therian is a very strong Dynamax option, has access to Max Airstream, the Intimidate as well, and of course a super effective Rock Slide onto that Togekiss.
Yeah, I think you leave the Togekiss behind this time around, at least for game 1, maybe even game 2. This is looking like more of a traditional set up the Colossal, Gigantamax the Colossal, deal big damage with the Colossal matchup, but I'm curious if there are any tricks up Marco's sleeve, because, you know, we didn't see the Colossal really much in our previous game. So let's go ahead and jump into game 1 of this winners round 1 match between Marco and James.
All right, this should be exciting. Regieleki finally coming out onto the field here in turn 1 of this matchup, next to the Grimmsnarl on James's side, and then Marco, who's on the bottom of the screen, has Dragapult and Rillaboom. No Colossal yet, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not lingering around in the back, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.
Yeah, and knowing that this is a more offensive variant of Dragapult than what we saw in previous Players' Cups, I think allows this to even be a possible lead. You can rely on the Dragapult for that big damage. Rillaboom can provide nice support with access to Fake Out, and Regieleki isn't going to be able to deal much damage. I mean, it's still going to do a lot of damage, but not as much damage as it would otherwise, since those electric-type attacks are going to be resisted. So a fairly flexible lead from Marco here. You know, he can try and go for some big damage onto that Grimmsnarl, flinch it so we don't see those nasty screens get set up, or maybe just target down that Regieleki so there's one attacker down and you only have 2 more to worry about.
Well, turn 1, no switches so far out of either Marco or James. We will have the Dynamax out of Dragapult on his side. James, really, Grimmsnarl's not going to think about Dynamaxing since it's such a supportive Pokemon. Potentially, Regieleki can go for it, but no, James is going to preserve his Dynamax for later. Fake Out into the Grimmsnarl secures that there won't be a Reflect or a Light Screen or anything this turn, so that will not help out James' defenses. Max Phantasm from Dragapult will knock out Regieleki there in 1 hit, so no Focus Sash there, and Regieleki really not being too effective here in game 1.
Unfortunately, no. I think we were all looking forward to seeing Regieleki bounce around and, you know, deal big damage and be as electrifying as it can be, but not going to happen in this game. I do want to take a moment while James sends out that Celesteela to talk about this Grimmsnarl, because looking at what this Grimmsnarl is carrying is absolutely wild. It is the Lagging Tail Trick variant. For those of you who don't know, Lagging Tail means you will move last in whatever priority tier you're going to attack in. So if Grimmsnarl is able to use Trick and swap items with one of the Pokemon on Marco's side of the field, that Pokemon's going to be moving last. Doesn't matter about Airstream, doesn't matter about Trick Room, it's just going to be a very slow Pokemon. And I like how James is saving that for later, because that could be key.
Urshifu will switch into the Grimmsnarl slot there, so and Dynamax finally out of James here on turn 2. That will be the Dynamax Celesteela. Celesteela is an incredibly bulky Pokemon that actually packs a stronger punch than you would imagine, since its defenses are so strong. If you can get some max Airstream boost, you'll get very fast as well. And the benefit of an Ultra Beast there is if you claim a knockout, you get the regular boost and a Beast boost into a certain stat. So that Grassy Glide from Rillaboom targeting down, Urshifu brings it down to its Focus Sash, and Max Phantasm from Dragapult connecting onto Celesteela. That will lower their defenses by 1 stage here, but now it is up to James. It's up to the Celesteela, and what Celesteela decided to go for on this turn was a Max Steel Spike, bringing its defense back up to neutral because of Max Steel Spike raising your defense by one stage. So now the Urshifu is in range of getting knocked out by anything. Rillaboom still has that priority, right, with Grassy Glide next turn, so you wonder what Urshifu's option is here besides a Protect, essentially. And, you know, Celesteela is going to have one additional turn of Dynamax after, where this is Dragapult's final turn.
Urshifu could go for Aqua Jet to target Dragapult or Rillaboom to try and get some chip damage down before it's going to be knocked out, but I don't think that's necessarily going to make a difference. Dragapult should be able to pick up the KO on Celesteela. It looks like it's sitting perfectly at 50% of its health, so it might come down to a damage roll. But otherwise, you know, very, very close. Rillaboom can target the Urshifu, can target the Celesteela. Marco is in a great position to just let Dragapult keep doing what it wants to do to make the absolute most of those Dynamax turns.
Grassy Glide from Rillaboom into Celesteela. That is Marco saying he does not know if the Max Phantasm by itself will take down the Celesteela, so securing it by the double target, and it does. An excellent turn out of Marco. James's Dynamax is now gone for the game. Celesteela only got one turn. Excuse me. Actually, it looked on like 1 HP. I thought it'd go down. That's on my end. Celesteela actually tanks it at incredibly low HP and sticks around for the max airstream to knock out Marco's Dragapult there. Not only getting the airstream boost, but also getting a beast boost thanks to the knockout.
So Celesteela just like riding that line perfectly, also revealing that it's going to be getting those beast boosts in its special attack stat. This means that Celesteela has been trained in such a way that the special attack stat is its highest stat out of all of them. So great information for Marco moving forwards. Also good to know that that was a roll. That was a really tough roll.
An unbelievable roll at that point.
Really unbelievable. Fortunately, Marco has enough priority so that you can stall out the possibility of a trick lagging tail from this Grimmsnarl. You can finally do that, like 3 HP worth of damage to that Celesteela to pick up that knockout. But wow, Celesteela, what a champ.
Yeah, what an absolute unit this Celesteela is for James, being able to get the speed boost. Also, if we think about it, Gabby, the max Steel Spike the previous turn was gigantic because it brought Celesteela's defense back to neutral, where if it was still at -1, the Phantasm obviously would have been able to take it out there. So James is just an incredibly smart player there, and it will be knocked out finally thanks to the Rillaboom on Marco's side. So Celesteela will go down this turn, but that was just, you know, I'm still kind of flabbergasted that Celesteela endured that hit.
I know, I think I am too. And the other key thing about Celesteela enduring that hit is that Urshifu is now on the field and Incineroar no longer has access to Fake Out. Unfortunately, Incineroar cannot be targeted by any Prankster boosted moves from that Grimmsnarl just because Incineroar is a Dark-type Pokemon. But the Rillaboom on Marco's side of the field certainly can go for Grassy Glide into the opposing Urshifu, pick up that knockout, and then it's just a matter of getting enough damage down onto the Grimmsnarl. So very, very well played by both these trainers. I love how that Celesteela made it a lot easier for James to give himself the best shot he has at this endgame. It's just this team, this Dragapult team, without even Colossal making an appearance as we get to see Marco's last Pokemon, is huge.
Urshifu will switch into the Incineroar slot there on Marco's side. James is Urshifu going for Protect, and the Spirit Break out of Grimmsnarl is pretty much the only option it has available to it to do any type of damage. It's a neutral attack onto the Rillaboom there, but would be super effective onto Urshifu. But you know, James down to his final 2 Pokemon, and his Urshifu is very, very, very low here. I think Marco's in a really strong position, especially because he still has the Intimidate access for if he wanted to switch an Incineroar back in.
Or if he wanted to switch Incineroar back in to get that grassy terrain back, as Rillaboom will no longer be able to attack with a +1 priority on those grassy glides. That's really something that Marco has to keep in mind here. While I don't expect Urshifu to be able to pick up a knockout on the Rillaboom, and you know, might be something that you just accept that you're going to be slower now, something just to watch. We do get to see these two Urshifu face off together, and it looks like Marco's is faster, at least this turn.
Yep, as of right now, you know, could potentially have the same speed, and Marco got lucky there, but for now it did outspeed. Woodhammer from Rillaboom doesn't even need the grassy terrain boost. That will take down Grimmsnarl, and Marco Martinez wins game 1 in winners round 1 against James Evans. That was a really fun match.
It was, and it's so wild seeing this colossal team work as well as it's working with
and see what James's adjustment is on in this matchup, because Marco, that was a very clean performance in game 1.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump into game 2. I want to take a moment to talk about Grimmsnarl, because it looks like James is leading Grimmsnarl into this game 2, as I was anticipating. Trick Lagging Tail. I mentioned it in game 1. The one thing that Dragapult has to its advantage, especially when staring down this Celesteela, is its speed. If you're able to protect or maybe just get through this one turn of fake out on the Grimmsnarl on the Grimmsnarl from the Rillaboom, and then connect Trick Lagging Tail on Dragapult the next turn, Celesteela will outspeed and deal a lot of damage, and that's possibly how you answer it.
Yeah, that's a great point. James deciding to lead Celesteela in this matchup instead of bringing it in on a switch in there shows that he thinks it's better served for Celesteela to start the game and match the Dynamaxes right away from Marco. We know that we had the pleasure of seeing that Dynamax Dragapult is the option out of Marco this turn here. So essentially going for the same strategy of lowering those defenses, and if if Celesteela doesn't go for a Max Steel Strike again, it won't have that defense boost, so it won't be able to take a second Max Phantasm on the next turn.
It won't, and Dragapult is really the reason, like that's exactly why you go for the Dynamax again on Dragapult. It's up to James to answer the threat. I do like how there's no Dynamax.
Yeah, no Dynamax out of James on turn 1. This Celesteela is just a regular little Celesteela, which is still a gigantic Pokemon in comparison, but not in compared to Dragapult in this moment. And that does well over 90% to Celesteela on that turn. Will lower both of the defenses of Grimmsnarl and Celesteela. The Grimmsnarl had to take that fake out from Rillaboom, and Air Slash onto Rillaboom is not enough for a one-hit KO there. So everyone's still hanging on, but there's a lot of damage that was done on that first turn.
There was a lot of damage, and I have to wonder if James was assuming that Celesteela would be knocked out in 1, possibly even 2 turns, so that whatever is in the back can come in and Dynamax and just have that better matchup. Assuming Grimmsnarl decides to put a little speed control into this game finally and give that Lagging Tail to Dragapult, I think that's going to be absolutely key. I cannot say that enough. It's great that you want to try and preserve it for later on in the game, James, but Dragapult is here now. Dragapult is a threat, and unfortunately, if we're looking at the Pokemon James brought the last game, I'm not sure if they can really find a way around this Pokemon if Grimmsnarl doesn't decide to stick around.
Yes, it's very tough to focus on the threat later on in the match if you don't deal with the threat that's currently in front of you, which is this Dynamax Dragapult. Landorus is the switch-in, though, for James, so Landorus goes into that Grimmsnarl slot, and that will be a neutral attack from the Grassy Glide. It's connecting on Landorus, and of course this Max Phantasm is going to take down the Celesteela there. So an ineffective game 2 out of Celesteela in this matchup. No Dynamax this time around, right? What we can assume is that James is bringing the Landorus out here as his Dynamax option in this game. Maybe the Grimmsnarl comes back out next to it, and then you start going for the trick option.
Yeah, but now the Landorus Therian is at -1 defense, and that's going to stack very nicely with the physical Grassy Glide that Rillaboom has. We saw it already do 50% of Landorus's health. I would think that it's going to be very close. Not necessarily a knockout, but very close if James does decide to go for the Dynamax here on that Landorus. So a great adjustment on paper. Unfortunately, this Dragapult is just too fast and too powerful and is doing a fantastic job of just keeping that Dynamax power rolling.
Yeah, the Landorus looks like it's his best option for James, especially on this turn for a Dynamax. Remember, Landorus does have access to Max Airstream thanks to Fly.
It does.
So that would be a super effective hit onto Rillaboom, knocking it out. Or a super effective hit onto Urshifu, bringing it down to its Focus Sash. The other thing that potentially how the Landorus is trained is that if it gets one Max Airstream boost to its speed, it could potentially outspeed the Dragapult, but that just shows how fast Dragapult is as a Pokemon, that not always does a Max Airstream let you outspeed it there. Landorus is the Dynamax of choice for James here in Game 2, and a Max Guard from Landorus there instead of Max Airstream. Trick
there
out of Grimmsnarl. There it is, Gabby. Lagging Tail has been put onto the Dragapult, so now it is going to be the slowest Pokemon on the field and always moving last. A very safe first turn to Dynamax from James here, just trying to secure that trick.
But going for the Max Guard ensures that there were no other defensive drops on the field. And now that Dragapult has returned to its normal size, that isn't necessarily something that James has to worry about moving forwards. Unfortunately, though, you have the Urshifu out on the field. It still has its Focus Sash intact. It's still going to be able to deal 3 critical hits with that Surging Strike. That's going to be a lot of damage to this Landorus. And even though Grimmsnarl will no longer be moving last in its priority tier, just the normal speed tier that happens in the game, it's still going to be slower than the Urshifu. So I think this Landorus has to consider what Pokemon to target, or maybe you just save yourself some time for later so that you can get that Intimidate down on Urshifu, because I think that's going to be really key as we move into this endgame.
So Landorus switches out into Urshifu for James there, so no really usefulness out of the Dynamax since it Max Guarded last turn and then switched out here. The Surging Strikes will be ineffective, obviously, into the fellow Urshifu on James' end. They still do some solid chunk of damage because of the critical hits, but Spirit Break from Grimmsnarl is super effective onto Urshifu, not even bringing it down to its Focus Sash, so you can tell that Grimmsnarl really has no training towards its special attack there. And Phantom Force out of Dragapult will kind of take it off the field for this turn, making it untargetable in case anyone tries to hit it while it's gone, similarly to Fly or Dig in that aspect. And then the next turn, it's going to be able to attack whatever target it went for, and you cannot protect through that attack. It would actually break through the protect there.
And it's also going to be returning to the field last thanks to the help of Lagging Tail. So Marco finding a way to use that disadvantage a little bit advantageously. Going to have his pick of targets here. I would assume that Dragapult's going to crash into that Urshifu when it does return to this dimension, but Grimmsnarl not going to take a lot of damage from a Ghost-type attack. So Marco doing a great job of keeping that offensive pressure going, but James switching around to try and find an opening. I think James's end game at this point in time is to make sure Landorus has the best possible chance of scoring. I think it's 3 knockouts at this point in time, and that's going to be really tough to find.
Surging Strikes from James. This time around, James's Urshifu is faster than Marco's, and that will be enough for a knockout. So James actually is finally getting a knockout here in this game. Now Marco is down to his last 3 Pokemon. Spirit Break, avoiding both of them, obviously, because Dragapult was still under that Phantom Force, and it connects onto Urshifu, but is not enough for a knockout. So Marco either has to bring Rillaboom back in here or reveal his 4th Pokemon.
I wonder how many turns of grassy terrain are left as well. Never mind, I just got my
There's
answer.
your answer.
I know, this is the perfect time to bring Rillaboom back in since no other Pokemon have access to priority fake out or flinching type moves on James's side of the field. Of course, another trick might be unfortunate, but I think that Life Orb is doing a bit more help for that Grimmsnarl, and I don't think Grimmsnarl is going to want to swap that one away. We also have the benefit, since we are watching from Marco's perspective, to know that his last Pokemon is going to be that Incineroar, but I like how Marco is saving that for later. With Rillaboom entering the field right now, you get your priority back, which is great. You can use Grassy Glide to knock out that Urshifu to deal some big damage to that Grimmsnarl thanks to the terrain. And then you can save Incineroar for that Intimidate once the Landorus makes another appearance, or you know, maybe even go for the Intimidate on that Urshifu. I would think that the Landorus would be the Pokemon that you definitely want to get an Intimidate down onto. But as long as Grimmsnarl is around, those Life Orb Spirit Breaks are going to hurt the Dragapult. So maybe saving it for later and ensuring that Dragapult will be able to resist a lot of Landorus's attacks, actually, is, I think, Marco just keeping an eye on the end game and ensuring that those pieces are ready to be sent out onto the field when the time is right.
Incineroar does switch into the Dragapult slot there, so Dragapult's kind of done its job for the most part in this match. The Lagging Tail really, you know, hinders its ability to be effective since it's going to be moving last every turn. But Rillaboom's Grassy Slide does take down Urshifu on James' end, so now it is just that Landorus and Grimmsnarl on James' side for the remainder of this game. Spirit Break with the Life Orb boost does a solid little bit to Incineroar, not as much as James would like in that spot, but now James is forced to bring Landorus back in.
James is forced to bring Landorus back in, and if Marco doesn't want to stick with that Intimidate, the Dragapult is in the back to swap right in and give Incineroar a second chance. I'm glad that you brought up the Lagging Tail on the Dragapult, because I think you're right. This Dragapult has accomplished, I think, a majority of what it was going to accomplish in this game. The best way for Marco to utilize this moving forwards would be to save it as a safe switch. You know, drop the Intimidate on the Incineroar if that's your priority, or maybe even use it to reset terrain later on in this game. But just very well played. James does have access to some great attacks on this Landorus. It is holding a Life Orb, does have, you know, the standard Earthquake, Rock Slide, Fly fare that we've expected to see at this point in time. But Fly is going to take 2 turns to connect with Rillaboom. Earthquake's going to deal damage to your own Pokemon. It's a tough position to be in.
Grassy Glide goes into Landorus's Protect on this turn as Dragapult switched into the Incineroar slot, so Marco can just bring the Incineroar in later again and get an Intimidate off onto the Landorus there. Spirit Break still not enough to take out the Rillaboom, and it's going to recover even more HP thanks to the grassy terrain on the field there. So, you know, Grimmsnarl, we thought it was nice that it got the Life Orb, but even with that extra 30% damage, it's still not doing enough.
I wonder if you switch in the Incineroar again immediately just to get a second Intimidate down on that Landorus. It might be a little bit greedy, but on the other hand, you know, this Dragapult is going to be taking a lot of damage from that Spirit Break. We do have the benefit of knowing, like you called out earlier, Joe, that this Grimmsnarl isn't necessarily trained in special attacks since it wasn't able to bring that Urshifu down to its Focus Sash. So maybe if Marco knows just how bulky this Dragapult has been trained, knows if he can take one of those Spirit Breaks and can react accordingly.
Rock Slide, Landorus does hang on with a sliver of HP, knocks out on Rillaboom, connects onto both, and this is huge for James. The Life Orb knocks itself out in this spot, but will Dragapult get flinched in here? Spirit Break out of the Grimmsnarl is super effective on the Dragapult. We don't even need to find out if he got flinched because the Life Orb is putting in work there. So it is Life Orb Grimmsnarl against Marco's Incineroar in this spot, which would be able to hit it neutrally, and Incineroar doesn't have too much to go after the Grimmsnarl.
It doesn't, but on the other hand, I think Incineroar is a better suited attacker in this situation. Flare Blitz is just a more powerful move than Spirit Break before you take the Life Orb into account. So we'll have to see how much damage these Pokemon can do to each other to figure out who exactly is going to out damage the opponent. I would assume that this Incineroar is, those Flare Blitz are really going to hurt, but I have not done my Life Orb Grimmsnarl calc, so let's see how this unfolds.
The other thing you have to worry about, Gabby, is the Flare Blitz recoil is essential. You can essentially view it as additional damage on the Spirit Break attack there because he's taking that first every time. But you see just how little damage that Spirit Break did there. If it was a little bit more, maybe James could have found himself in a position. But at this point, eventually Grassy Terrain's going to run out, right? So you're not going to have that health recovery. And eventually is now. The Grassy Terrain runs out. Incineroar can just click Flare Blitz again, and Marco Martinez can move on to winners round 2.
Yeah, that Life Orb really helping out Grimmsnarl, but I think in the end hindering it just a little bit, as that damage it took from using an attack really offset the healing provided from the Grassy Terrain. So even though Flare Blitz just was doing more damage at the end anyways, that Grimmsnarl just, it wasn't really the item I think it wanted to hold. It was really cool, and I think definitely